Hey, this is Zaklog the Great. So, I've been a fan of a certain podcaster, Dan Carlin, for several years now. He's got two shows one about history, hardcore history, and one about current events and politics, common sense. And back in January, he released a show about the protests and riots on January 6th at the U.S. Capitol. And I didn't listen to it for a long time because I like Dan Carlin and I didn't want to be angry at him. But I finally did listen to it, and I have to say something. Um, I can't go through the whole thing because it's so frustrating and so short-sighted from someone whom I previously had respected. There's also there's Brandolini's law. If you're not familiar with it, the amount of energy needed to refute bullshit is an order of magnitude larger than to produce it. So, first thing I wanted to address was just for a long time, I'd listened to this his show for several years, and he talked about wanting to see political candidates from outside the system, wanting an anti-establishment candidate. Well, what would an anti-establishment candidate have to look like? They would have to be rich. They would have to be self-financed and financed through, popular support, not through the big, political machine. If they pay for your campaign, they own you. They get to say what your positions are. A successful anti-establishment candidate could not be polite, calm, and fit in. They would just get steamrolled by the system as it stands. They would have to be loud. They would have to be brash. They would have to blow the whole thing open. Most likely, an anti-establishment candidate would take a popular issue that a lot of people care about, that a lot of people have interest in, but that is not sufficiently addressed by the system. Illegal immigration, for instance. In other words, an anti-establishment candidate would have to look almost exactly like Donald Trump. Dan Carlin, did you think this through at all? So, we functionally have a two-party system. Yes, it's not the law, but the way the things are set up, that's, the result it produces. So let's look at the other candidate whom, by default, Dan Carlin favors. Joe Biden. Mentally, he's falling apart. He has serious dementia, and it's getting worse. He cannot complete a speech. He says strange things that don't fit the situation. He's not meeting with other world leaders. He's not meeting with other presidents and prime ministers. Those are frequently being sent to Kamala Harris, which is an insult, by the way, in terms of diplomacy and foreign policy. That's an insult to them. Also, He persistently has creepy and disturbing behavior with young girls. It's really weird. So that's who, as I said, by default, you favor Dan Carlin. You called, Donald Trump divisive, and you said, you're supposed to be the president of the whole country, not just your people. Frankly, if anything, Donald Trump has been far too conciliatory. In Charlottesville, he says, what did he say? He said there were good people on both sides. He also said, contrary to what the lying news, who's all you apparently listen to, said, he also said, totally disavowed the Nazis and the white supremacists, whatever. He also said there were good people on both sides. There were people there who just didn't want a statue of a great American historical figure, Robert E. Lee, taken down. This makes them all evil. But he also said, the people who were attacking them were decent people too, some of them. During the campaign at his rallies, there were chants of lock her up about Hillary Clinton. And, he encouraged and went along with this. Well, first of all, Hillary Clinton is a criminal, and she belongs in prison. Her handling of classified information was so terrible. It amounts to it's tantamount to treason. Okay, but okay, yes, there are these chants about his political opponent. What did he actually do once he was in office? Nothing. Hillary Clinton's free. Nothing happened to her. Last year, 2020, there's these, BLM riots all year. And what did he do? What did President Trump do? Well, there's his platinum plan, which is a $500 billion giveaway to black people. Oh, yes, he's just for his own people, and he screws over the rest of the country. Are you paying attention? Oh, also, they get, criminal justice reform, which practically means that criminals are going to be set free to prey on decent people, disproportionately black criminals. But yes, he doesn't care about, his anyone outside his own group at all. During the riots, he never sent in the National Guard to put a stop to these through, force, even though, frankly, he would have been entirely entitled to. It would have made perfect sense. And, you have this picture, you appear to have this picture, Mr. Carlin, that Donald Trump is dangerously unstable. Apparently you didn't notice all 4 years. No new wars? Like, during my lifetime, that may be a first. If it's not a first, it's like a second. That seems worth talking about. That seems worth acknowledging. Wow, he talks mean. Oh no. No new wars. And he's trying to draw back our forces across the world. Seemed like something you would have been in favor of. Yes, he's being sabotaged by the establishment. He was not able to be successful at a lot of that. Meanwhile, his very first week of office, Dementia Joe is sending new U.S. troops to Syria. But, we don't have the mean tweets. And you said, President Biden says we need to unite the country. Talk is cheap. Yes, he said the word unity. Is that really all it takes for you? Are you that stupid, Mr. Carlin? What did he actually do? He immediately started huge giveaways of government money not exclusively to black people, but deliberately excluding white people. Okay, he's getting sued and turned back by the courts on a lot of this, but that was the policy. And he's putting critical race theory, which, by the way, what that practically means is hate whitey. He's putting that back in, in all the places that President Trump had tried to roll it back from. Our military is being ideologically purged. If you are not loyal to this administration, not to the U.S., to this administration, your military career is at risk. The Justice Department is viciously, persecuting the January 6th protesters. They're often held without bail, sometimes in solitary confinement. There are really ugly reports coming out about how they're being treated. By the way, just for comparison, Kamala Harris helped raise bail money for the BLM rioters. Okay? So does it sound like unity? Does it sound like a unifying force to you? Does it sound like someone who is the president of the entire country? Or does it sound to you like someone who takes care of his people and screws over the opposition at every turn? And you said Obama was the president of the entire country. That scumbag took every possible opportunity to stir up racial hatred. Henry Louis Gates. Oh, the police acted stupidly. Trayvon Martin. If I had a son, he would have looked just like Trayvon Martin. Sent the Justice Department to investigate Darren Wilson. Couldn't find anything. Don't doubt they tried. I'm actually kind of surprised they didn't fake up something. Unifying? President for the entire country? No, he's president for his people and took every opportunity to attack the opposition. At a prayer breakfast in a Christian country, he chose to slander Christians from 700 years ago to excuse the violent actions of Muslims today. His administration was fighting in court a group of Catholic nuns that didn't want to pay for contraception. Demanding they violate a basic tenet of their faith. A group of nuns. This isn't just... Yes. He's the president of the entire country and considers us all, equally, U.S. citizens whose rights must be respected. Mr. Carlin, you said there's often a strain of paranoia on the right wing. So, if 10 years ago I had told you that there is a U.S. citizen, a Jewish, millionaire, nobody has a clear idea where his money actually comes from. He has a private island in the Caribbean where he keeps a harem of underage girls as sex toys, basically. And he has a private plane, and he, flies all kinds of wealthy and powerful people out to this island, and nobody knows what's going on out there. Nobody knows what is done. Not only that, but he operates with impunity for years and years. And when he is finally arrested and arrested for these crimes, well, he commits suicide in a federal prison that hasn't had a similar suicide in, I think, over 2 decades, while the guards are asleep and the cameras just happen to not be working. And if I had told you that 10 years ago, you would say I'm a conspiracy nut. Every word of this is proven fact. So, talking about, paranoid conspiracy theories on the right, maybe you shouldn't be quite so dismissive. We know, or you could know if you choose to, that the Obama administration illegally spied on President Trump and his campaign. This is now established fact. They grossly persecuted General Michael Flynn. The abuse of our court system in that case was horrifying. They brought trumped up charges against Roger Stone and Steve Bannon. They sent a SWAT team to arrest a 65-year-old man at his house at 8 o'clock in the morning, and there were news vans there. He wasn't resisting. He wasn't a danger. The NSA is spying on all of us all of the time. We know this. To get a little more specific, a little more narrowed down, the Biden administration is clearly intent on destroying our Second and Fourth Amendments rights regarding guns. He said he was going to bring in, for his gun policy, Beto O'Rourke. Hell yeah, I'm going to take your AR-15. The red flag laws, that if a neighbor reports that they're worried about your mental health, the police can just come into your home and take your guns. No trial, no warrant. Just, hey, we don't think you should have these anymore. That's never going to be abused? You think that's never going to be abused? They are teaching whether you want them to or not, if your children are in public school, they are teaching them every kind of sexual perversion. And, there are cases of teachers basically recruiting kids to become transgender, which, to elaborate on that a little bit, means sexually mutilating them, possibly destroying their ability to have kids of their own. But yes, we on the right wing are just unreasonably paranoid. We have a problem, keeping up with reality. And you talked about censorship, and people complain about censorship, and you said, well, you can't, you think people should be able to advocate for civil war? You can't do that. You couldn't do that back in the day. Why would you be able to say those things now? How about reporting true stories about a candidate's family? The New York Post broke a story about Hunter Biden and the grotesque things that were discovered on a laptop he abandoned at a computer repair shop. And Twitter just shut it down. Facebook, I believe, did the same kind of thing. Nope, you're not allowed to talk about that. We can't tell about that. You good with that, Mr. Carlin? We can't talk about these things? On the one side. Now, you can say anything you want about President Trump and, his supporters, and nothing will happen to you. Can't talk openly about, question the official narrative about COVID, about the vaccines. You can't talk about, on these platforms, you're likely to get banned if you talk about, side effects of vaccines. If you mention the fact that technically, I think 3 out of the 4 aren't vaccines at all. They're an experimental medical treatment of a kind we've never used on humans. And the side effects and the apparent deaths from these vaccines, can't talk about that. You good with that? That's all cool. Can't say unkind things about other races on these platforms. That'll get you banned too. Now, I will mention, you can say the vilest, most hateful incitement of violence kind of things against white people on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. No problems. You will run into nothing. No obstacles to that. But if you, for instance, mention the murder rate among black people in the U.S., you're quite likely to run into problems. if you mentioned that, wow, there seem to be an awful lot of illegal immigrant rapists in this country, you're likely to run into problems. Good with that, Mr. Carlin? That's just fine. These things should be shut down. We shouldn't be allowed to talk about them. And the question of the election, and you say, oh, there's no evidence for election fraud. Nothing happened. You said, Mr. Carlin, that there would have to be a massive conspiracy. And that's just impossible to believe. Okay, first of all, no. There would not have to be this big nationwide conspiracy. What there would have to be is several small conspiracies in 4 or 5 key states. Which, wow, it looks a lot like that's what actually happened. That would cover it. And they wouldn't have to even know about each other, be working together. Just, fiddle with things here, doctor the vote there, throw away these ballots there. It wouldn't. A lot of it could be done without any conspiracy at all. Just 1 or 2 people here or there, unaware that anyone else is doing this, jiggering with the system. The mail-in ballots, the complete lack of security, the complete lack of election integrity measures around that. I mean, it opens that whole thing up in a way that it's impossible to have any kind of trust in what happened. But, that aside, there was, in fact, a written confession of a massive conspiracy to ensure the correct outcome in a Newsweek article a couple of months ago. There was this big campaign among all these rich, powerful interests to make sure that whatever the American people wanted, the election would come out to their result. They said this. Oh, they fortified the election. They changed the rules. All of their rule changes, strangely, were in a direction that made fraud much easier. Mail-in ballots make fraud much easier. Reducing signature checks makes fraud much easier. But okay, there's no election fraud. There was nothing. Why were there these late night vote dumps in several locations? It's kind of weird. And why did those late night vote dumps all overwhelmingly trend one way? Why in those same locations were the observers kicked out or excluded? All perfectly normal, nothing to see here? Why was there practically no signature match enforcement? You watched a 60 Minutes episode that covered all this. Oh, very impressive. Some guys on CBS put together a TV episode, and that settled all the questions for you. Because, people on TV can never lie. They don't have any capacity to put together propaganda. What is it? One of them, one of the things that one official they talked to said that there were 2 dead voters they found 2 dead voters in the entire state of Georgia. And you believe that? Millions of people, millions of votes, and you think there were only 2, that were done under the name of dead people? Because everybody is, perfectly honest. There's no, temptation for people to cheat in these questions. And you said, this election official they were talking to was a Republican. Why wouldn't he back up President Trump? It was never Trump versus the Democrats. From the beginning, it was Trump versus the establishment. Republicans and Democrats alike. Just look at the, Republican Lincoln Project, which opposed Trump. Happened also to include a pederast. Wonder if he was friends with Jeffrey Epstein. Richard Barris examined, the voting records in Michigan and said he found, thousands of dead voters. I've seen, people debunking this. Haven't seen any. I haven't seen anyone actually willing to go through, as he did, name by name and show us what's going on. They just say, well, we looked at it and this wasn't, and we found this, and that, but they don't actually show us, what's going on. Steven Crowder, theoretically not a journalist, theoretically a comedian, but frankly he's more of a journalist than, most people who claim the title these days. Steven Crowder sent out people to physically visit the addresses of voters in Nevada. Found several people voting from addresses that don't exist. That just aren't there. There's nothing there. Nothing suspicious about this? No, nothing questionable? Nothing worth getting upset about when it's our election for president? And finally, let's talk about the riots. You said that, riots will happen. And, when you have a big protest and you have all these people, there are going to be riots and no one can really control them. It is kind of funny to me, though, how those riots consistently happen on one side of the political spectrum. There's riots with leftist causes all the time. BLM is probably the worst, but there are a number of others. But not really so many on the right wing. Yeah, you could probably call, January 6th a riot, although, not everybody actually in the Capitol could reasonably be called a riot, or some people walked in doors that the police had opened for them. They're being treated as rioters, by the way. They're being prosecuted as rioters. But, not a lot of, right-wing riots. Well, okay, now, there is violence when right-wingers, try to have a speech, have a political speaker, or try to hold a protest of their own, and leftist assholes attack them. And they get no protection from the police because the powers that be are all on the side of these violent leftists. That's what Charlottesville was, by the way. There was no violence. It was a planned, permitted protest until violent leftists attack them. Name one other protest, right-wing protest in the last 20 years that has become a riot where they weren't attacked. Ashley Babbitt was shot. Why did they think they could get away with this? Well, they just watched, most of a year in 2020 where, BLM was rioting and burning police stations and looting major stores with almost no consequences. Not only that, but their political side got everything they could possibly want out of this. Why would they think they could riot like this? Why would they think there would be no consequences? Because there hasn't been. But you see, the rules will be enforced against one side. I guess you're okay with that. You think that, it was perfectly reasonable that Ashley Babbitt was shot. Okay. There is only one possible reason why the January 6th protests is any worse in any way than the riots that we have had to suffer through all last year because a black criminal died of a fentanyl overdose while in police custody. There's only one way in which that can be distinguished. And that is because the January 6th protest and riot offended the dignity of the ruling class. And you're okay, Mr. Carlin, with the reaction and what they have done. Are you even American? I have listened to you, Mr. Carlin, for several years, and I've found a lot of what you say interesting, but I cannot possibly put into words the amount of respect I have lost for you. God save us and God bless America.